Hey guys, welcome back to Zach Going Fire. Today we'll be going over this book that came out earlier this year, Be Smart, Pay Zero Taxes by Mark Quann. Well, this book is something. I'll get into all the details and I'll let you know what is good and what is not so good about this book. And if you're new to this channel, I'm a truck driver who plans to retire next year at 44. I was bankrupt just 10 years ago, and prior to that, I used to be a financial advisor. I have read dozens and dozens of personal finance books over the years, and let me tell you, this one is definitely a special book. Be smart, pay zero taxes. Is it possible? Well, stay tuned. I'll let you know what I think. My first critique of this book would be that, and I will get into some of the positives about the book later, but my first and one of the biggest critiques I have about the book is that a large portion of the book pushes readers to his website where he promotes his financial courses. And to me, that is just a way for him to make more money. If it was truly a good book, then it should just stand on its own. I know of many good books that you can read the book and there's no need for any other financial course in addition to that. The first several chapters of the book are what I would call just fluffery. He spends the first chapter talking about what gave him the epiphany to borrow money to invest rather than investing your own money. The second chapter of the book is talking about his course that he's selling and him and his friends that sell this academy. The third chapter of the book is trying to redefine what the definition of money is. And I think that as a grown adult, we all know what money is. The fourth chapter is talking about a made up story about an average person who becomes a multimillionaire by buying just some of the best stocks over the last 20 years and never selling them. Well, hindsight is 2020, and that is truly the definition of cherry picking data by buying like Apple and Microsoft and Amazon and Google and putting all of your money into those eggs from the last 20 years. It doesn't get into, any real substantive information until chapter 5. You're 25 pages into the book. So that's a lot of fluffery. So it is in chapter 5, Avoiding Dead Money, on page 25, when he finally gets into some of the substance of the book. And he talks about building what he calls the 5 pillars of wealth building. So he starts off with pillar 1, stocks and ETFs, pillar 2, real estate, 3, life insurance. That's questionable. We'll get back to that one. 4, cryptocurrency. 5, gold and precious metals. And he spends several different sections of the book talking about investing in these 5 things. And that is a good way to be diversified for sure with your investing. And we'll talk about a little bit about each one of these. In chapter 6, he finally gets into some of the meat of the book. And he talks about his strategy to use margin to pay for life's expenses. He talks about having a client when he was a financial advisor who had credit card debt, and he advised her, as opposed to what another financial advisor had told her to do, was to sell her stock holdings and use that to pay off her credit card debt. He advised her to use a margin loan from her brokerage against her stocks to pay off her credit card debt. So he calls that turning bad debt into good debt. This is an okay idea if you are very, very careful. If you take too much margin and you're your stocks or holdings drop by too much, you will face a margin call. And so you are playing with fire. Um, a margin call would force you to sell if your stocks drop in value by enough. You would be forced to sell at the worst possible time. You never want to have to sell when things are down. That's when you want to be buying more. I should point out that this author, Mark Quann, did used to be a financial advisor. And so he does know a lot of things about finances. And one of the things that he points out about a margin loan, and these are some of the good things about a margin loan, is that there is no application, no credit check. It does not report on your credit report, and there's no required payments on the loan. That's right. Usually your brokerage will just take the available cash, like if you had dividends that hit the account or interest that hit the account, or if you put in, if you make deposits of cash, your brokerage will take that on a monthly basis towards your margin loan. There's usually no minimum required payment. Again, the only risk would be the margin call if your investments drop by a significant amount, and the amount that your margin has that it would need to drop by, that depends on the brokerage and the investment that you are in. Different brokerages have different tolerances, and you need to check with your brokerage and the particular investment that you're looking at for what tolerance it has for where the margin call would be. The more risky the investment, usually the higher the margin rate would be. The margin call would come in sooner on a riskier investment, in other words. One of my biggest problems with the book is that he ignores the drag on your returns when you have a margin loan. So if you expect normally under normal circumstances to get anywhere from 7 to 10% return on your investments in the stock market, and you had a margin loan of, let's say, 10% interest on that, then you would reduce your returns by 10%. So it amplifies your gains and your losses when you have a margin loan. And the author doesn't really address the amplification possibilities of losses. The author also goes into talking about his preference for a Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA, and even more so, he prefers a regular taxable brokerage account over both of those because you can borrow against that. And he goes through a lengthy dialogue about an example of investing $5,000 cash into ticker symbol SPY, which is the ETF for the S&P 500, or one of the many ETFs that represent the S&P 500. And so he goes through and breaks it down, but his math is wrong. Let me show you what I mean. And anybody who's trying to explain why a Roth is better than a traditional, or a traditional is better than a Roth, they're really the same. Let me show you very simply how that would equate to the same. Let's say that you were getting paid $10,000 for a job that you did, and you had to decide like how to invest that money. Now, if you take that money and put it into your 401k or your traditional IRA, then you would be putting in all $10,000 of it because it's not taxed at that moment. So then let's say you get a 7% return, then in 10 years your money would basically double to $20,000. When you go to pull that money out after 10 years and spend it, let's assume that you're getting taxed 25%. So At the 25% tax rate, you would take your $20,000 and multiply that by 0.75. That would give you $15,000. So that's your spendable money after 10 years with 7% return. So let's compare that to putting it into a Roth IRA. You get paid the same $10,000 for your job that you did. Then you immediately pay the 25% tax on it. So the $10,000 times 0.75, you get $7,500 that you can invest into the Roth. After 10 years, that money would basically double, equals this times 2. That's at the same rate of return, $15,000. When you go to withdraw that money, it's tax free. You have the same $15,000 left that you can spend. And any other math that people try to tell you, they're just overcomplicating it. The transitive property shows you that you can do this in any order, whether you tax it before or after. You still have the same amount of money to spend. Part 2 of the book goes into several chapters about real estate. Now, in my opinion, these chapters are excellent. I wish that I had read these chapters 20 years ago, and they give lots of great advice on real estate. I'm not going to spend much time going over these chapters though, because I'm no longer personally invested in real estate. To me, real estate is something that you can uh, accelerate your returns with and even beat the stock market if you know what you're doing and put work into it. I don't really want to put any more work into my investing than I need to. I want to have the easy life and travel around the world. But if you want to know some ideas about making some extra money and saving money on taxes with real estate investing, I would recommend part 2 in this book where he covers real estate, several chapters. Part 3 of the book, he talks about using life insurance, and he brings up some good points that I agree with, such as using term life insurance as part of your financial planning and making sure that you have the right coverage and the right riders for your personal situation. But then he starts to throw up some red flags with me when he talks about indexed universal life insurance. He calls it the Swiss Army knife of investing and tax avoidance. And I'm going to quote in his own words: there are a lot of critics who scream about the fees of permanent life insurance and always push the buy term and invest the difference strategy. These same folks are often the ones who recommend investing in 401ks and paying off all debt. Count me as one of those critics, as well as Clark Howard, Dave Ramsey, and I could go on down the list of other prominent personal finance speakers. And you can talk to just about any true financial professional and they will tell you the same thing unless they're trying to get commission out of selling it to you. On the very next page, after he talks about using indexed universal life insurance to borrow from for your investing and tax avoidance, then he talks about using a dividend portfolio where he has investments and he quotes where he gets 26% dividend yield. Now, I know that that is possible because I've seen those instruments that provide that kind of dividend yield. However, what he's not telling you is that there's always a drawback for those kinds of investments. And those kinds of investments definitely have an upside uh, cap that you could get for your return on it. So keep in mind that when you are investing during the accumulation phase, uh, the best thing that you can get is the actual return, not the income. The income is what you're looking for later on when you are in the decumulation phase of retirement. So I currently use some of these income ETFs that use options to provide a high level of yield. Um, but I'm not trying to use these for my growth portion of my portfolio. And I don't think the author of this book really goes into the differences in those strategies. Let me go back just for a minute about how the author refers to the Index Universal Life Insurance as the Swiss Army knife of investing and tax avoidance. And I'm just going to laugh at that for a minute because look at the things that you use in your own life, in your kitchen. How often do you grab your Swiss Army knife, if you have one, to perform some kind of action? If you want a spoon, you're going to grab the spoon that you want to do the job. If you want a screwdriver, you're going to grab the best screwdriver you have around that does the job the best. You're not going to reach for your Swiss Army knife just because it has that tool. So you should think about your investing portfolio the same way. When you want a specific action done, reach for the best tool for the job, not the investment that has the capability of doing all sorts of different functions, but none of them the best. Now, in chapter 36, he goes over investing in cryptocurrency. And if you want to diversify your investments and I don't I don't think there's anything wrong with diversifying your investments. It's not the strategy that I use, but if you wanted to have a diverse portfolio, then it would not hurt to have some cryptocurrency in it. And he recommends, and I definitely agree with this, is that if you're going to do it, you look into an ETF that is widely traded that has SIPC insurance that you could buy through a regular brokerage like Fidelity. And he doesn't recommend any certain percentage of your portfolio, but I wouldn't recommend any more than, like, say, 5% of your portfolio in cryptocurrency. Finally, in chapter 38, he goes over buying gold and silver. And again, he recommends using ETFs to buy those things. And that's another way to diversify. And I look at that as the same as I would with a cryptocurrency ETF. In part 6 of the book, he goes into owning a business. In chapter 39, he goes into some of the benefits of owning a business, and he offers a lot of really great insights on the benefits you get from running a business. I'm going to skip over a lot of this just because I don't personally run a business, but I did find what he had to say very motivating. And if I was maybe 10 or 20 years younger and wanted to run a business, then I would definitely highly recommend this section of the book. And he talks about really great ways to build your wealth by running a business. Even if your business isn't all that successful, the tax write offs that you can get from running a business in America are incredible. And you really use that to build your wealth in all sorts of ways. And he goes into many different ways to do that. I also have to laugh at this because I used to be a financial advisor, but in the beginning of this guy's book, he has a note to financial advisors, and that's what it's called, a note to financial advisors. And in the first line of this note, he says, "My goal is not to have all my readers fire their financial advisors. Remember, I was one of you." Then, towards the end of the book, here in one of the last chapters, he writes about finding a fiduciary. And I will read the last paragraph in this chapter. He says, "So, what is the solution? Take control by learning the strategies yourself. You might discover you don't need a financial advisor after all." Now, that's just chef's kiss. So, what's my conclusion after reading this book, Be Smart, Pay Zero Taxes? I think that there is a lot of good things to take away from this book. Overall, I would not recommend that this be your only personal finance book. There's lots of books that you can read and they stand on their own. That you, if all you were ever going to read was one book on personal finance, I would recommend either The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins or Financially Stupid People Are Everywhere. Don't Be One of Them by Jason Kelly. And there's several others. Those are probably the top two in my opinion. This book goes along with your education. If you already know about personal finances and want to learn more, then this is a great book. But I look at it like exercise. So if your goal is to lift a 100-pound weight in the gym, or a 500-pound weight in the gym, you wouldn't go in the first day and try to lift it unless you wanted to maybe get hurt. You would start with a much smaller weight. So I look at using margin and some of the other strategies in this book the same way. So that is why in my own personal investing, I have started using a small amount of margin, but I started very, very small in relation to my net worth. I have currently just over $3,000 on margin from M1, my brokerage account. And my plan is to just keep it very, very small and wait until the market crashes when everyone else is getting scared. That's when I feel like maybe I might take a larger margin. But I think if you haven't started small and you've built up that muscle to keep it under control, then you can get in trouble using too much margin at the wrong time. And you don't want to get caught using a high amount of margin and then the market crashes, because the risk is the margin call. You might have to pay it all back, which means that you would have to either put more capital in from somewhere, or you'd have to sell some of your shares at a loss. And that's one of the worst things that you can do financially for the long run. So, um, is this book a buy or no? Yes, if you've read other financial books and you want to learn some additional things about how to increase your investing knowledge. So don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, guys, let's continue to drive towards financial freedom.